Rain fell in heavy sheets across the black jungle world of Terska 4. The trees swayed under the wind, and strange glowing vines twisted through the branches like veins under skin. Deep within this alien wilderness, a warrior crouched low behind a rock, her breath slow and controlled. Her name was Saraxa, born from the war caste of the Tharn Dominion. Every scar on her gray skin told a story. Her golden eyes were focused on the trail ahead, bare footprints in the mud. Human prints. She had tracked him for 5 days. A male alone. No army, no guards. No weapons beyond what he could make with his hands. Still, he moved like a ghost. Fast, silent, clever. He left traps behind that caught wild beasts. He used smoke to cover his tracks. He even disguised his scent using crushed bark and fire ash. Saraxa wasn't hunting a weak prey. She was hunting a survivor. One who didn't know fear, but why? Why was a lone human on a forbidden world, surrounded by dangerous creatures and war-trained hunters like her? Was he a scout? A spy? A deserter? Her orders were simple. Capture him alive. Question him. Or, if needed, end him. Yet as she moved quietly through the underbrush, something about this hunt unsettled her. She had seen him once. Only a flash. His back turned, sitting by a stream, washing something in the water. She could have struck, thrown a spear, ended it, but she didn't. Because what he washed wasn't food. It was cloth. She didn't understand why that stopped her. Now her muscles were tight with rain and cold. Her gear was heavy with water. The wind howled louder. But she pushed on. The tracks led to a small cliffside, a shelter under a fallen log and moss-covered stone. She expected a fire, a trap, a fight. What she saw instead made her stop mid-step. The human was sitting under the shelter. A rough blanket draped over his shoulders. In his hands, he was weaving carefully long strands of animal fur into the cloth, using sharp bone as a needle. Nearby, another blanket was already finished, smaller, lighter, folded with care, and next to it something that made her breath catch. Her own discarded shoulder guard, a piece of her armor she had lost on the second day, cleaned, repaired, set beside the blanket like a gift. He had seen her. He had known she was there, and instead of setting traps or running, he made her a blanket. Saraxa's fingers gripped her blade, but she didn't move. The human looked up, his eyes calm. No fear, no surprise, just a small, tired smile. He didn't speak. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply nodded toward the folded blanket, then returned to his task. Threading fur, pulling tight, making something warm. The rain beat harder. Her heart thumped in her chest. For the first time in her life, Saraxa didn't know what to do. The human wasn't what she expected. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. And yet she felt more danger now than ever before. Not from his hands, but from the feeling building in her chest. Confusion, curiosity, maybe even trust. She stayed hidden in the shadows for a long moment, watching him. He moved with quiet skill, his fingers steady despite the cold. His fire was low, controlled. He wasn't trying to draw attention. He was surviving. But more than that, he was offering her something, warmth, peace, maybe even kindness. Saraxa didn't step forward. Not yet. But for the first time in her life, the blade in her hand felt wrong. And for the first time, the war in her heart whispered something strange. Don't kill him, understand him. That night, Saraxa did not sleep. She stayed hidden among the wet leaves and vines, eyes fixed on the strange human. He worked slowly, his hands never rushed. Every thread he pulled through the blanket looked like a ritual. She had seen soldiers make traps, repair gear, even perform battlefield surgeries. But she had never seen someone take time to make something so gentle. It made no sense. He was hunted. He should have been running. Why sit in the open and make a second blanket? And why fix a piece of her armor? By morning the storm had passed. A fog settled low and strange birds with glowing wings chirped from the canopy. Saraxa hadn't moved an inch. The human, still unaware she was watching, stepped out from his shelter, stretched his arms and started collecting berries and roots from nearby. He checked a trap hidden under a rock. Inside it, a small six-legged creature was still alive. He set it free. That confused her more. She followed him as he moved carefully through the brush. He was fast but not panicked. It felt like he knew this land better than she did now. He used stones to mark paths, left trails of crushed leaves to return later. Everything he did had a purpose, yet it was never aggressive. Saraxa's instincts told her to strike. She had the high ground. A clean shot. Her muscles knew the movements. But her hand wouldn't move. Something had changed in her during the night. Her mind, trained for war, was now filled with questions. Why had he repaired her armor? Why offer her warmth instead of pain? The human paused at a tree with smooth black bark. He took out a knife made from bone and carefully carved symbols into the wood. Saraxa narrowed her eyes. The marks weren't human. They were Tharn runes, her language. But twisted, changed, like someone learning to speak without knowing the words. It hit her. He was trying to communicate. She didn't reveal herself. Not yet, but she moved closer, still hidden in the mist. She studied the symbols. They weren't perfect, but the meaning was there. He had drawn an image of two figures, one with Tharn armor, one human, sitting beside a fire. No weapons, no fight, just sitting. Saraxa stepped back. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a trap. This wasn't war. He was asking for peace. A Tharn warrior would never believe it. They would call it weakness. But she didn't feel weak. She felt something she hadn't known in years. Curiosity. As the human returned to his camp, he stopped suddenly. His head turned. He looked straight into the trees where she stood. She froze. Had she been careless? Was he bluffing? He raised his hand, not a weapon, slowly, open palm, no threat. Then from his pack, he pulled out the folded blanket and placed it on a rock near the path. He didn't speak. He simply nodded and backed away. She remained still long after he vanished behind the trees. When the forest grew silent again, she stepped out. Her boots pressed into the soft moss and she approached the rock. The blanket was dry, made with care, simple but warm. Next to it was her shoulder guard, tied with thin cords and cleaned better than any Tharnfield medic would bother. Saraxa touched the cloth. It was real. The gift was real. Not a trap, not a trick. He had seen her. He had known she was near. And still he offered comfort. Her fingers tightened around the gift. And for a long time she just stood there. Something inside her, something cold and sharp, started to melt. She no longer wanted to finish the hunt. Now, she wanted to understand the human. Saraxa didn't return to her mission post. She didn't report in. That alone was a serious crime under Tharn warrior law. But something deeper than fear kept her in that forest. It wasn't weakness. It was something else. Something she couldn't name yet. The blanket he left was warm against her shoulders as she watched the human from a distance again. He moved through the jungle without fear, yet always cautious. She noticed how he avoided crushing plants that could scream when stepped on. He never disturbed the birds or cracked loud branches. His body blended into the land like a natural part of it. The Tharn believed humans were careless, loud, emotional creatures. But this man, he moved like a whisper. Every action was calm and clear. She finally followed him close enough to hear him hum. A soft tune, no words, just sound, peaceful, familiar somehow. She didn't know what it meant, but it made her heart slow. It made her wonder what kind of life he came from. Saraxa found herself moving differently too. She no longer stalked him like prey. She studied him like a puzzle. She noticed how he used tree sap to seal his wounds, how he dried meat between heated stones, how he carved little animals into bark, not to mark territory but just to create. To make the trees smile, she thought. He was building a world, not escaping one. At night, she didn't sleep in the trees anymore. She stayed nearby, close enough to smell the fire smoke, hear the crackling, feel the quiet of his presence. She should have felt exposed, but she didn't. She felt safe. That scared her more than anything. 3 days passed. On the 4th, the human did something that shattered the stillness. He left. Early, before the sky fully brightened, he packed a small bag and stamped out his fire. He folded the unfinished blanket and tucked it under a rock, covering it with leaves, like a gift left behind. Then he walked east, toward the cliffs where Tharn patrols often scanned from above. Saraxa's instincts screamed. Was he surrendering? Seeking death? Or worse, was he heading straight into a trap? Without thinking, she moved. She broke cover for the first time in days and followed fast. Her feet kicked through wet brush. Her breath hitched. She had no plan. Only one clear thought: he must not be caught. She caught up to him near a deep ravine. He stood at the edge, staring out at the rising sun. His eyes didn't flinch when he turned to see her. Their eyes met. Finally. He didn't run, didn't speak, just gave a small nod, as if he had known she'd follow. Syraxa stepped out fully, armor showing, blade still at her hip. But she didn't reach for it. He raised both hands slightly. No threat. Just calm. She pointed at the cliff, her voice rough from silence. There are patrols that way. He blinked. Then nodded again. Slowly, he took out a small metal disc from his pocket, burnt and broken. A beacon, Federation make. He turned it over, showing her its cracked surface. Crash survivor? She asked. He said nothing. Just showed her a small chain around his neck. A child's bracelet hung from it. Burnt too, Syraxa looked away. She understood now. He hadn't come here. He had survived here. Alone. She exhaled. The mission didn't matter anymore. The orders felt distant and wrong. The hunter inside her had already faded. He pointed back toward the forest, then made a sleeping motion. Safe. Camp. Rest. Syraxa. Hesitated. Then she nodded. They walked back together in silence, not as enemies, not yet as friends, but no longer strangers. Syraxa had never walked beside a human before. She had seen them on battlefields, behind prison walls, or across sharp negotiations. But never like this. Never step by step with no sword between them. The forest seemed quieter now. The birds chirped softer. Even the wind moved with care, as if watching them. They returned to his small shelter beneath the rock and fallen log. He added 2 more stones to the fire ring and motioned for her to sit. She didn't, not right away. Her Tharn blood still boiled with caution, but her legs were tired, her mind more so. Finally, she sat, one knee bent, one hand near her blade, just in case. He didn't speak much. Only handed her a small fruit and nodded. She bit into it without hesitation. Poison would have made no sense now. While she ate, he worked silently. He stirred the coals with a stick, added damp leaves to make smoke, and boiled water in a cracked metal cup. Every action was quiet, steady, without fear. She didn't feel like a prisoner. He didn't act like a host. They were just 2 beings under the same sky. Later, he took out a new bundle of animal fur and began weaving again, thread by thread, pulling through with careful hands. She watched in silence. It was like watching someone paint with no brush, just motion and patience. She finally asked, "Why blankets?" He looked up, blinked, then tapped his chest lightly. "Warmth," he said. His voice was low, soft, unused. Syraxa narrowed her eyes. "You had weapons. You could have set traps. Why not fight?" The human held up his hands, then mimicked an explosion with his fingers. He pointed to the sky, then touched the burned beacon beside him. "Crash," he said. "No war, just me." That one word, me, carried more than she expected. It carried pain, loss, maybe guilt. Syraxa looked down at the repaired shoulder guard beside her. "You fixed my armor," he nodded. "Why?" He hesitated, then took a stick and began to draw in the dirt. 2 figures again, her and him. No weapons. Just sitting. He pointed at it. Not enemy. Those 2 words hit her deeper than any blade. Back on her ship in her camp, everyone had told stories about humans. Savage. Unpredictable. Dangerous. She believed them. Until now. Not enemy, she repeated slowly, almost tasting the words. He gave a small smile. Not wide, just enough. The silence returned, but it felt lighter this time. She sat back and listened to the fire. Time passed slowly, like the jungle had paused to observe them. That night, she didn't return to the trees. She stayed near the fire. Not too close, but close enough to feel the heat. The human placed the finished blanket near her without a word, and lay down with his back to the flames. No fear of her. No need for watch. It was the first time in her life anyone had turned their back to her and still trusted her not to strike. Sleep came to her slowly. Not because she feared danger, but because she feared something else. Change. The next morning, when the sun broke through the mist and light touched the leaves, Syraxa was still there, wrapped in the blanket, warm. She looked at the human, who was already awake, carving wood. Something inside her shifted. Maybe he was not the only one trying to survive. Maybe she was too. Days passed, but neither of them spoke much. Words weren't needed. The human, whose name she still didn't know, worked on small tasks during the day, gathering food, fixing tools, making more blankets. Siraxa watched at first, then began to help. It started small. She sharpened a stick for him when his knife dulled. He glanced at it, nodded in thanks. The next day she helped him smoke the meat he caught. By the third day they were working like two people who had shared the same land for years. No war, no questions. She didn't report back. Her communicator remained silent. She kept it deep in her gear, buried under the food rations. Every time she thought about sending a signal, her eyes drifted to the human, sitting quietly near the fire, stitching cloth like it mattered more than his own survival. She wondered how long he'd been here. One afternoon, as the sun broke through the thick clouds, she found him sketching shapes in the dirt again, circles, lines, a crude drawing of a ship. She pointed at it. Yours? He nodded. Down, he said, tapping his fingers downward. Family? She asked, his eyes lowered. He traced two small marks next to the ship, then drew a flame over them. Siraxa understood. Gone. He didn't cry. He didn't even sigh. He just sat there with the stick in his hand, shoulders quiet. But Siraxa's chest felt heavy. She reached out and placed her repaired shoulder guard beside him again, not as armor, as a message. I'm still here. That night the wind changed. The jungle grew restless. Birds scattered before sunset. Even the insects quieted. Siraxa rose, scanning the trees. He stood too, picking up his walking stick and packing up tools quickly. Then she heard it. Metal feet crunching leaves. Not his, not hers. Tharn search drones. She cursed under her breath. They'd come looking. She had been gone too long. Silent too long. He looked at her with calm eyes. No panic, just understanding. She spoke fast. You need to run. He didn't move. Instead, he took the folded blankets and placed them gently in a bag. Then he looked at her, nodded once, and started toward the eastern cliffs, the same place he had tried to go before. No, she hissed. That path is exposed. He looked back, then waited. For her decision. For her to lead. Siraxa made her choice without thinking. She dashed left, toward the older trail behind the sharp rocks. He followed without question. No hesitation. They moved like wind between trees. She led, he matched her step. She knew the patrol routes. He knew the terrain. Together they became something neither had been alone, fast and invisible. They crossed a stream, climbed a steep hill, and ducked under a thick net of vines. Behind them, a drone's red light scanned the area they had just left. Close, too close. She grabbed his arm and pulled him down into the roots of a massive tree. They stayed still, breaths quiet. The drone passed overhead. He looked at her, their faces only inches apart. Why help me? He whispered. She blinked. Her voice cracked. Because you never tried to harm me. He stared at her, then smiled slightly. It wasn't happiness. It was trust. When the drone was gone, she didn't let go of his arm right away. Neither of them spoke, but something had changed again. They were no longer hunter and prey. They were something new. Now, something the jungle could not name. The next morning, the forest felt different. The drones were gone, but their presence had left the land uneasy. Birds stayed silent. The winds blew colder. The human and Siraxa moved camp before sunrise, walking until their legs burned. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Danger was close. They found a hidden cave near the edge of a broken canyon. Thick vines hung over the entrance and shallow water flowed beside it. Inside, the air was cool, dry, and smelled like stone and moss. It was perfect. He began to clear the ground while she set a line of traps. Without saying anything, they fell into rhythm again. Her training and his survival skills mixed like water and stone. For the first time, Siraxa realized she didn't miss the sound of her squad. She didn't miss their orders or the war chants before missions. She didn't miss the coldness in their eyes. Here, silence felt better. That evening, while smoke from their tiny fire rose into the dark cave ceiling, Siraxa finally asked, "What's your name?" He paused, then picked up a stick and wrote it slowly in the dirt. Milo. She repeated it softly. Milo, he smiled. And you? She hesitated. For so long, her name was only used in war, in orders, in reports. But now, in this quiet place, it felt different. Siraxa, she said. He nodded like he'd been waiting to know it. Later that night, Siraxa took out her communicator. The screen flickered faintly, signal weak. A message flashed. Status report overdue. Mission incomplete. Last location pinged. Backup en route. She stared at the words for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the reply button. Then slowly she shut the device off. Milo watched her but didn't ask. He simply handed her a cup of warm water, made from boiled roots. They sat by the fire, their backs against the stone wall, both staring into the flames. After a long silence, he whispered, "They'll come?" She nodded. "Yes, more warriors. Not like me." His eyes didn't flinch. "You'll stop them?" Saraxa looked into the fire. "I don't know. I used to be one of them. I believed what they taught. That humans were a threat. That kindness was weakness. That survival meant destroying anything different." Milo didn't speak. She looked at him. "You've survived here without hurting anyone. You gave me warmth when I was your enemy." "You weren't," he said simply. Those words struck deep. The next few days they stayed hidden. They built small barriers around the cave, covered the path behind them with false trails. Saraxa taught Milo how to spot Tharn sensor drones. Milo showed her how to use plants to mask heat signatures. They worked like they had known each other forever. One night, while they shared a dried root for dinner, Milo took out something from his pouch. "A small crystal, blue, glowing faintly, a memory stone?" Saraxa asked. He nodded and placed it gently on her palm. She held it to her forehead. For a moment she saw everything. A crash, fire, a child's scream. Milo dragging wreckage aside with burnt hands. Nights of crying. Days of walking, hunger, cold, loss, then calm. Building fires, learning the land. Drawing shapes in the dirt, waiting for someone to find him. Her hand trembled slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes soft. She looked at him. "You could have hated everything." "I did," he said. "At first. But hate burns too hot. It doesn't keep you warm." She stared at him, her throat tight. In that quiet cave far from war and orders, Saraxa realized something. She didn't just want to protect him anymore, she wanted him to live. Truly live. Saraxa woke to the sound of something cracking outside the cave. Her hand moved to her blade instantly. She scanned the entrance, heart steady but sharp. Milo was already crouched low behind a boulder, his eyes trained on the dark shape moving in the trees beyond the vines. It wasn't an animal. It was metal, a scout probe, Tharn design. Fast, small, armed. Saraxa pulled Milo back behind the wall just in time. The probe hovered inches from the entrance, its red scanner flickering, humming quietly as it searched. Her pulse slowed as she counted seconds. If the drone scanned heat long enough, it would detect them. Milo didn't ask what to do. He just moved toward the fire pit and smothered it completely, letting smoke fill the room fast. She opened her cloak and covered them both as they lay flat against the cave floor, pretending to be part of the stone. The drone hovered longer than expected. It let out 2 sharp beeps, then spun in place and darted back into the forest. They waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. Only after the air grew cold again did Saraxa sit up. "They're close now," she said. Milo didn't answer. He didn't need to. She looked at him carefully. His eyes weren't full of fear. Just readiness. He wasn't used to war, but he was used to surviving. "We'll need to move by morning," she said. "Northwest. There's a ravine too deep for drones. They'll lose signal." He nodded and began packing. No words, no questions. Just trust. Before they left, he stopped by the fire pit and pulled out one last blanket. Unfinished, still rough. He folded it carefully and placed it on the stone near the wall. "For who?" she asked. He shrugged, then tapped his heart. "In case someone like me finds it." That answer silenced her more than any speech could. They traveled all night. Thick branches scratched their arms. Roots tripped their feet, but they didn't stop. When they finally reached the edge of the ravine, the sky was turning pale and birds began to sing again. Saraxa scanned the area. "We can rest for a few hours. Then we climb down." Milo sat near the edge and looked over. Far below, fog crawled between jagged stones like a ghost. "How deep?" "Deep enough to bury signals," he nodded. Then after a pause asked, "What happens after?" She sat beside him. "They'll keep searching. Until they find proof of death." "You could give them that," he said quietly. She looked at him. "And lie?" He didn't answer. She shook her head. "No, I've done enough for them. Let them come. Let them question. I'm not theirs anymore. Milo looked at her long and hard, then smiled faintly. I thought you were going to kill me, he said. She snorted. I was. What changed? You? They sat in silence. Wind moved their hair. Below them, the fog continued to rise. After a long moment, Saraxa pulled something from her gear, her command badge. She held it up, then crushed it under a rock. Sparks flickered. The light died. No more tracking, she said. They'll think I'm gone too. Milo blinked. You'd do that for me? For us, she replied. This world tried to bury us both, but we're still here together. He looked down into the mist. Then let's go where they can't follow. They stood side by side at the cliff's edge. No longer just survivor and soldier. Now something else, something neither of them had a name for yet, but it felt right and it felt free. The climb down the ravine was steep and dangerous. Loose rocks slid underfoot, and the fog made it hard to see where one step ended and the next began. Milo moved carefully, testing every foothold before shifting his weight. Saraxa followed behind him, her hand always ready to grab his arm if he slipped. They didn't speak during the descent. The only sounds were the soft thuds of boots on stone, the wind howling between the walls, and the distant calls of unseen creatures far below. When they finally reached the bottom, their clothes were soaked with mist, and their hands scratched and red, but they were safe. No signal would pass through the thick rock around them. The Tharn would never think to search this deep. It was as good as invisible. They set camp under an overhanging ledge where the ground was dry. Milo gathered stones for the fire, and Saraxa cleaned a few small fish they caught in a narrow stream that ran cold and fast through the canyon. As they sat by the fire that night, Milo took out a small flat piece of metal, a broken part of his crashed ship. On it he had scratched tiny symbols. He handed it to her. What's this? She asked. He pointed at the marks. My days here. From the start she looked closely. Dozens of notches, tiny lines marking each sunrise and moon. You've been here over a year, she whispered. He nodded. Longer than I thought I'd survive. Saraxa stared at the metal. Her fingers brushed over the final mark. It was drawn differently. Not a line, but a circle. This one? She asked. He smiled slightly. The day you arrived. She said nothing for a long time, then gently handed it back. You shouldn't have been left here. I wasn't, he replied. Not anymore. That night she couldn't sleep. Her mind spun with thoughts she had buried for years. Thoughts of war, of orders, of the things she had done in the name of loyalty. And now here she was, sleeping beside a man she had been sent to kill, wrapped in a blanket he made while holding a blade she no longer felt the need to draw. She turned to look at him. He was already asleep, his back to the fire, peaceful. She wondered if he dreamed. And if he did, whether she was in those dreams now. By morning, they moved again, deeper into the ravine until the walls opened into a hidden valley. What they found there stunned them both. Ruins, ancient, covered in moss and vines. Stone structures carved with patterns older than any Tharn culture. Milo ran his fingers across the markings. Not human, Saraxa nodded. Not Tharn either. Maybe before both, there were shelters there, half broken but dry, fire pits, even a fresh water spring bubbling up from the rock. A forgotten place. They chose the largest shelter, repaired the cracks with vines and leaves, and made it home. Not a hiding place, a real home. Days passed, then weeks. Milo built a small garden using seeds he had saved from dried fruits. Saraxa set traps and trained him to use her old weapon just in case. They spoke more now. She told him about her first mission, about how she had trained since she was a child, about how she had never been allowed to rest. He told her about his family, about his sister who had loved the stars, about the day the ship fell and he thought hope was gone. But here in the Forgotten Valley, hope was growing again, not through weapons, not through orders, but through two people who should have been enemies, now sitting side by side and choosing peace. Saraxa stood at the edge of the ancient valley, staring up at the sky. The stars were clear tonight. The fog didn't reach this far, and the broken cliffs opened wide above them like a giant mouth whispering to the heavens. She remembered the names of the stars. The Tharn taught them in training, not for beauty but for navigation, for war. But tonight, they didn't feel like targets. They felt like stories. Behind her, Milo worked silently, fitting stones together to build a better wall for the shelter. He no longer rushed. He took pride in the little improvements. A fire pit with smooth stones, a roof patched from bark, a place that felt permanent. She walked back slowly, watching him. "That wall won't hold against heavy wind," she said. He smiled and tapped the top stone. "That's what I have you for." She smirked and helped him adjust it, laying her hand over his to steady the piece. In the quiet of the night, neither of them noticed the flicker in the trees at first. A distant light, then another, red, blinking. She froze. Milo saw her face change and turned. "What is it?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The drones had returned. But not just drones this time. War scouts. She knew the signal flashes. 2 short, 1 long. Tharn trackers. "They found the beacon fragments," she said. "They're scanning deeper now." Milo's jaw tightened. "Then we run." "No," she said, shaking her head. "They're too close. If we run, we leave a trail. They'll follow. They'll burn this place. Then what?" Saraxa walked to her gear. She hadn't touched her armor in weeks, but now she pulled it out and strapped the pieces on one by one. The metal was cold against her skin, but familiar. Milo watched her silently. "You're going to fight?" "I'm going to buy us time." He stepped forward. "No, we do this together." She looked at him. "They'll kill you. They'll kill you too." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The fire between them crackled softly. Then she said, "You're not a soldier." "Neither are you anymore," he said. She didn't reply. But she didn't argue. He grabbed a slingshot he had made from vine and bone and a pouch of stones. Not a warrior's weapon, but it would do. As night fell deeper, they moved through the valley, placing traps, covering paths, and setting markers only they could understand. It was like a dance now. 2 minds, 1 purpose. To protect what they had built, to protect each other. The first drone arrived before dawn. It came silently, low and scanning. Saraxa stepped into its path, blade ready. A quick slash, a spark, and the drone fell. She dragged it into the bushes and crushed the signal core with a rock. But more would come. Milo climbed a high rock wall and lit false fires in 2 spots to mislead the trackers. Saraxa cut a line into a tree trunk, marking it as a dead zone. The valley was no longer just home. It was now a battlefield, but not for conquest, for defense. And this time, Saraxa wasn't fighting alone. When the second scout appeared, Milo threw a stone from his slingshot. It hit the drone's lens with perfect aim. Saraxa leapt from the side and slammed her elbow into the drone's core. The machine dropped. They shared a quick breath, then kept moving. Hours passed. The final red light blinked on the ridge above. Too close. Saraxa turned to Milo. "Go. Hide in the cave. I'll hold this one." But Milo didn't move. He stepped beside her, raising another stone. She stared at him. He just said, "You never ran when I was the one being hunted." And she understood. They would stand together now, no matter what came. The final drone descended like a hawk, wings sharp, engines humming low. It scanned the valley from above, its sensors flaring in red arcs across the trees. This one was different, heavier, armored, and equipped to call a full strike team. Saraxa's breath slowed. She had seen this model before. It didn't just search, it confirmed, and then it destroyed. She turned to Milo. "If it gets a signal out, they'll bomb the whole valley, not just send scouts." Milo understood without needing more words. He glanced at the gear, then at the shelter. The fire pit, the half-built wall, the garden, everything they had built would be gone. He looked at her. "Then we stop it here." Saraxa raised her blade and crouched low in the underbrush, eyes fixed on the drone's flight path. Milo moved to the left, climbing the boulders for high ground. They didn't need a plan. They knew each other now, step by step, breath by breath. The drone circled once, then descended slowly, scanning heat, movement, life. At the perfect moment, Saraxa leapt from the bush, striking its wing. Sparks flew, but the drone rolled away, avoiding full damage. It let out a warning pulse. Milo didn't hesitate. He threw a jagged stone straight at the exposed core behind its head. The drone twitched, turning toward him. It launched a small bolt of plasma, just missed. Then Saraxa surged forward again, grabbing its arm and slamming it into a rock. The drone fought back, strong, heavy. It caught Saraxa's arm and hurled her backward into a tree. She fell, breath knocked out. Milo jumped from the rock wall onto the drone's back. It spun wildly, trying to throw him off. He reached into its open panel and yanked wires free with shaking fingers. A burst of blue light shot out but fizzled. The drone screamed in digital rage, rising high into the air. Then it stopped. It hovered, flickered, then shut down. Milo dropped to the ground, coughing. Saraxa got up slowly, limping. She ran to him. "You're not dead?" she asked, half smiling. He looked up, breathless. "Not yet." The drone lay broken in the dirt. Its signal core fried. No message sent. No army coming. They had done it. Together. They sat in the grass side by side as the sky above slowly turned golden. A soft wind moved through the trees. The birds returned, singing again. Saraxa leaned back, breathing deep. "I never thought I'd stay in one place for this long." Milo rested his head against the tree. "I never thought I'd trust someone again." She turned to him. "You saved more than this valley, Milo." He met her eyes. "And you saved me." She reached into her pouch and pulled out something small. A new badge, made from the drone's shell, shaped into a round disc. No symbol, no army. Just a blank circle. "For you," she said. "A mark of peace." He smiled and tied it to the chain around his neck beside the memory stone. Later they returned to the shelter. They repaired the fire pit, gathered fruit, sat close when the chill came. Milo picked up a fur and began weaving again. "Still making blankets?" she teased. He nodded. "Always." "For who now?" He looked at her with a quiet grin. "For the ones who come after. The ones who get lost like us. Maybe they'll need warmth too." She sat beside him and helped thread the strands. War had forgotten them, but they had remembered something more powerful. Home, not built from stone or steel, but from trust, from kindness, and from one quiet choice: to stop hunting and start healing.